Have you or anyone you know ever said these words? Oh my gosh, don't make me laugh so hard. I'm gonna pee all over myself. Or maybe you're a mom and you've told your child, you've had to tell them, sweetie, I wish I could jump on the trampoline with you, but I just can't. Well, if you or anyone that you know has ever said those words or something along those lines, they're probably experiencing what we call stress urinary incontinence. And what that means, I'll start with urinary incontinence. That just simply means involuntary leakage of the bladder, so of urine essentially. So I have my pelvis here, my pelvic model. I also have the bladder. So the bladder is an organ that sits inside of the pelvis. It's responsible for capturing urine as it filters from the kidneys down the ureters into the bladder itself. And then of course the bladder helps and it works with our pelvic floor to help us empty urine from our bodies, which is, we know that urine is waste. It's a waste product of our bodies. So urinary incontinence is essentially involuntary, accidental leakage of urine when we don't want it to happen. So in other words, if you want to pee and you pee, that's one thing. But if you don't want to pee because you're laughing, you're coughing, you're sneezing, you're jumping, running, etc., that is considered urinary incontinence. Now, there's a couple of different categories. Today we're talking about stress urinary incontinence, and we are specifically going to cover how to stop leaking with coughing and sneezing. I'm gonna focus on those two today because they are so common and I see them all the time in my office. Okay, so obviously we know what stress incontinence is. I'm gonna dive into a little bit more of why stress incontinence happens. So I'm gonna grab my pelvic model here. So essentially the pelvic floor, which is basically all the muscles you can see in the red back here and also in through there, these muscles attach to this bony structure inside of our body called the pelvis. These muscles work essentially like a trampoline. That's the best way I like to describe them. So if you think of a trampoline, these bony structures right through here that you can see that form a ring all the way around the red, that would be like the hard metal exterior of a trampoline. Next, as we move inside, we'd have the springs that connect the mesh itself to the trampoline. Those springs per se would be like the ligaments, the connective tissue, the fascia that connect the tendons, I guess I would say also, that connect these muscles to the bones. And then lastly, the mesh or that material, the netting of the trampoline itself would be all the red muscles that you can see in through here. So stress incontinence is a dysfunction. Essentially, it's something that's happening when the pelvic floor and the rest of the body is not functioning optimally. And so I'll talk about why that happens and what that really means. And so with stress incontinence, a lot of us think to ourselves, oh, like I've got a weak bladder, or maybe my muscles down here are too weak. They don't have enough strength to maintain, that closure or that the urine from coming out. Well, yes, sometimes that is true. Sometimes these muscles truly are weak, and there are sphincters that live right outside of the urethra and also around the vagina, and those help to kind of support the bladder, the urethra, and the urethra is where pee comes out of from the bladder. And sometimes truly, yes, those muscles are weak and they need that like beefing up, to really strengthen and uplift them. Oftentimes though, I would say the majority of times that I see in my office, these muscles are too tight or they are overactive, meaning they're contracted so much that they don't have any room left to give. They have no more force production. They are so tight and so, wound up essentially, for lack of a better term, that they don't have any shock absorption. They have no ability to maintain that closure. They may fatigue out faster, so they let go and boom, that's why the urine comes out. Another big thing that I see with the pelvic floor muscles is a lack of coordination. And what I mean by that is simply, let's say with coughing and sneezing, when you get that big cough, that deep cough, or that sneeze that catches you off guard, your pelvic floor muscles aren't coordinated in the sense that they're not turning on right when we need them to turn on, and that can be a major cause of leakage as well. So how do we stop leaking with coughing and sneezing? We're gonna dive into that today. I'm gonna give you my top 3 tips to stop leaking with coughing and sneezing. So first up, without further ado, number one, we have this tip called the knack, okay? So what is the knack? Well, I think majority of us have heard of something called a Kegel. Now, I will say that Kegels they're pretty well known. Most people know what a Kegel is. A Kegel is simply a pelvic floor muscle. All the red that you can see here it's a contraction. So it's a lift up, a squeeze of those muscles, and then you should be able to relax, let go, kind of drop that contraction down. But a Kegel is just simply that squeeze action of these muscles down here. Now, Kegels, I think, are sometimes demonized in a sense by social media, but also sometimes they're overused in our society right now. Meaning that sometimes, maybe your doctor has told you, oh, just do Kegels, do them every day, and maybe you have not been assessed by a pelvic floor therapist. So truly, Kegels may not be the best option for you. I won't demonize them myself because I do think they have a time and a place. Sorry, I'm going a little soapbox right now. Kegels can absolutely help if you really are on that weak side and you need that beefing up of your muscles. Kegels can do the trick, but they're not the end all be all. They're not the answer to everything. And so that's something super important. But with this first tip, the knack, you are going to, when you get that urge to cough or sneeze, this is what I want you to do. I want you to squeeze, and the way you're gonna do this Kegel, I'm flipping my model upside down here, or this way. This is your anus. Next up, you have your vagina. After that, you have your urethra. So if we look at it from this way, we've got back to front, okay? You are gonna squeeze your anus, squeeze your vagina, squeeze your urethra. You do it on all kind of one fell swoop here. Think of a squeeze first, and then a little bit of a lift. And you're gonna do that right before a pre-contraction, a pre-activation of those pelvic floor muscles, right before that cough or that sneeze comes on. And sometimes that alone can stop you from leaking, just period. So that's my first tip. Tip number 2 is going to be for coughing and sneezing. Posture is so important. The way I like to describe this is that your bladder, your bladder is a soft and kind of squishy organ because it holds fluid inside of it. It's not like a bone. It's not super firm and tough. It's an organ that has some give to it. So if you're going like this, and you're just kind of folding over in half, or maybe you're coughing and you're really, you're really just like driving downwards, or maybe bringing your knees up at the same time, I like to think of an accordion. So an accordion is, if you think of an accordion, you open it up, and then if I were to like kind of fold it on itself kind of in half, it's gonna have all this pressure. You're gonna hear that accordion, all the wind kind of come out of it. Same concept here. So tip number 2 is to cough or to sneeze, what I call is up. So what I mean by that is you're gonna lengthen through your spine, lengthen through the crown of your head, and when you cough or sneeze, put your elbow up and go up. So you're gonna go or sneeze into your elbow by lengthening and not crouching over. Once again, this tip combined with the knack can do wonders for your leakage. It can absolutely reduce it, if not completely eliminate it, just with those 2 things. So last but not least, our third tip of the day. My third tip of the day is something that I call leak and 3-peat. And what I mean by that is, let's say you did both of those things and you're like, darn it, I still leaked. Then I want you to do this. So what you're gonna do is go back to the knack, which is, let's say this is afterwards. So you've already coughed, you've already sneezed. You are going to take a moment and you're gonna squeeze your pelvic floor muscles, not your glutes, not your abs, not your inner thighs squeezing together, just the muscles between your legs. These muscles in through here. You're gonna squeeze them. You're gonna give me a fake cough or like a fake sneeze. You could even do that. And then you're gonna let go. So it looks like this. So I'm gonna squeeze. I'm squeezing my pelvic floor muscles as I do this video. I'm gonna cough and then I'm gonna relax. And I'm gonna repeat that 3 times. What this is going to do is it's gonna start to retrain the muscle coordination and muscle activation, because the knack is actually a reflex of the pelvic floor muscles. So it should be automatically doing this, but oftentimes people don't have the reflex anymore, but the reflex can be retrained. So just to reiterate here, we got 3 main tips to stop leaking with coughing and sneezing. And those tips are: number 1, the knack, which is a pre-activation, a pre-contraction of the pelvic floor muscles before that cough or sneeze comes on. Number 2 is going to be to cough or sneeze up. We're gonna lengthen through our bodies, not do that whole fold over motion or action, and really lift up and expand through the whole trunk. And number 3, if you do end up leaking, you're gonna try something called the leak and 3-peat, where you're gonna do that pre-activation of the pelvic floor, give me a fake cough or a sneeze, let it go, relax, and practice that 2 more times so it ends up being 3, and that will start to get that coordination piece going. Okay, so those are my top tips for not leaking with coughing and sneezing. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you learned something new. If you have any questions, please reach out. But thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.